Hey YouTube, this is Kevin Boland of Boland Small Engine, and I thought I would just continue off my prior video. I just wanted to go a little more into depth as to, the removal of the carburetor, what to look for with your diaphragms, basically what type of intake manifolds there are, and more or less just give a little more depth into the carburetors. This particular style is called a pulsa prime carburetor. You see a lot of pulsa prime carburetors, as I mentioned earlier, on Briggs engines. They've been around for quite a while. Of course, you have various styles of carburetors that are on Briggs. One-piece flow jets, two-piece, there's even a crossover. Those are just a few that come to mind right offhand that I've encountered. You have a pulsa jet, vacuum jet. As I say, these are just some that's just coming to mind quickly for me. But this is probably the most typical style that you're going to see nowadays, with the exception of, your one-piece flow jet, okay? And you see them typically on Quantrums, which I will be later doing a video on Quantrum engines. I apologize for getting so tongue-tied. I've obviously got a lot that I want to talk about, and probably getting a little overexcited about it. So just bear with me, guys. I'm going to do my best to show you on this particular style how to pull the carburetor, where each of the gaskets go. I know that can be a little confusing to people, so that's going to really come in handy, I think. So without further ado, I'm just going to go ahead and get into this. Obviously, I've already loosened up the screws. Yes, I have had this off, so I already know where the problem is, okay, in this carburetor. But I'm just going to go, as I said earlier, just a little more into depth. First thing you want to do is remove any of your external parts, okay, the elbow, that gasket. Remove the carburetor, and I'll be honest, guys, most of the time when you remove the carburetor, they're not going to come off that easy, okay? You have two gaskets here. This is your diaphragm gasket. This is the base gasket for the carburetor. Now, a lot of people get confused. They'll want to put the base gasket on first. You cannot do that, guys, okay? This will not work. I'm going to remove the carburetor out of the way so I'll have a better look here. You cannot do this gasket first. It will not work, okay? This gasket is meant for the carburetor, okay? So remember, you want to put the diaphragm on first. The way you can tell the difference if there's some confusion is obviously the way they're made, but also at the same time you look for the tabs. Okay, you can see that this particular gasket has tabs. Those tabs cover the hole here that's in the gas tank, and it will cover the hole here in the carburetor. Well, maybe I need to show that a little better. The hole here in the carburetor. So, if this gasket was new, which I showed you in the prior video, what part number that would be 795083. You will have two individual gaskets. This one, of course, as I said, is the diaphragm. The diaphragm will go on first. What I like to do when I put the diaphragm on, I like to give the bottom of the gas tank just a light layer of oil on my finger. Then I'll apply the diaphragm. I'll coat the top of the diaphragm lightly and place the carburetor gasket on top of it. And do that once again. Just apply a light layer of oil. The reason that I like to apply a light layer of oil, it makes it so much easier when you're trying to push the carburetor back down on the gas tank and it'll actually keep this spring from pushing down on the diaphragm so hard that it just makes the assembly a little easier. Okay, to make a long story short. Also, I want to add that if you have a carburetor like this, it's always a good idea to remove the tubes. It's not too hard. You can just pull out on them and they'll remove themselves. The reason being is these tubes are really bad for getting sediment and debris stuck in them. If you have an old gas jug that you leave out, and there's grass deposits that fall within the gas jug, you're going to see that the screen here is going to get clogged, and you're going to need to clean it. Okay, all you need to do is just basically remove it as I showed you. Take you a little carb cleaner, spray it down the tube until you get a real good run coming out of it, and then just take you a toothbrush or what have you and just kind of clean over the screen. A lot of times that works just fine. You also have a sediment screen right here. You want to pull that sediment screen off. As you can see, there is sediment inside this screen. And you want to do the exact same thing. Spray it out with carb cleaner. Blow it off if you want to lightly with an air compressor. I wouldn't tell you to hold it right on it because you'll actually collapse them. I've done that myself. I've made that mistake myself. Keep a little distance when you do it. Also, on these carbs, this center jet comes out. A lot of people don't realize that, but it is important to clean it. It's not always necessary, but it is important. Now, what I like to do when I'm doing that, I like to just find an average set of needle nose pliers. Nothing fancy. I like to reach in, grab the butterfly, pull it out, and then I'll just lay it straight down, and I'll remove this piece right here. Now from here you have the option, you can reach in with a screwdriver and you can push straight down. This will really come in handy. I'm trying to show this the best I can. I know my hands are in the way, guys, and I apologize for that. And all I done was just push down, and that gives me access to this jet. And I do not believe in doing this, guys. I apologize. This is just a little tighter than what I'm accustomed to. I'm going to go ahead and just push out on this best I can. There we go. Pull this jet out. Make sure that the passages are clean. As you can see, these are fairly clean. Spray down it. Be very careful, okay, not to get carburetor cleaner on this particular little sealing O-ring. If you do, it can cause you a little aggravation, okay? So just keep that in mind. What I would actually do is pull it off, okay, before I spray carburetor cleaner in it. But that's optional. It's up to you. As long as you spray it very quickly and you dry it very quickly, you're not going to have any problems. Now, at this point, I'm going to go ahead and show you. There's a little square indentation on this jet. That square indentation goes up towards the rear of your carburetor, okay, as you can see, and you want to push in on that and it'll snap. Take your tube, as you can see right here, this of course has got debris in it, but not in the hole, so obviously this is just demonstration purposes and I'm just wanting to show it off. I would actually clean this very thoroughly before I would ever put this back together. You want to put this back in and it also will snap. As you heard, it snapped. Now once you've got these back together, of course you'll have your screens clean, your sediment screens. You want to put that back on. And of course you would take your shaft. Ooh, I didn't have that snapped as good as I thought it did. There we go, guys. Make sure I got that snapped in there. There we go. Now it's snapped in there. You want to put this back in. And of course the butterfly. Some people like to call them a choke plate. Nothing wrong with that. Now, there is something wrong with that when you install it backwards, guys. I apologize for that. It must have turned on my finger as I had it off the table. Great. Now, of course, it works. So we're not going to worry about the carburetor anymore. As you've seen in my other video, I basically just pulled the primer out with the primer removal tool. I showed it off in the other video. Once again, that part number is 19461. At this point, after you have placed the oil on the diaphragms and whatnot and what have you, you can take the carburetor, of course with the primer being installed, place the tube in the hole, just like this, and push down firmly. That will align the holes for you. You do not want to let up on it, okay? Quickly place your screws back into the holes. And tighten them down. Not screeching tight, guys, okay? Just snug. Obviously, I'm going to be taking this carburetor off and putting it on another tank. As you've seen in my other video, this tank has actually got a fracture. So keep that in mind. I'm just doing this just for demonstration purposes. And as I say, you just want it to be snug. You'll go around all of the screws and snug them down first, okay? Keep in mind, you do not want to over tighten these, okay? It will actually deform the plastic. Also, it can warp the gas tank, okay? Because the carburetor and the gas tank work together, okay, on these particular carburetors. So keep that in mind. Do not warp the plastic. You'll have seepage and leakage coming from around the gaskets if you do. Also, if considering how close the muffler is to your carburetor, if you're running this engine and you start seeing something like that, it's very risky because the gasoline can actually vibrate, hit the muffler, and cause it to catch on fire, guys. So keep that in mind. Don't over tighten. Alright? Good and snug is good enough. As I mentioned in the other video, this is something you want to look out for. Basically, it's the same thing. If gas can escape this tank and lay on top of the tank and vibrate, it's going to find its way to the muffler, and it can be bad, guys. I've actually seen the tanks explode. So keep that in mind. I've pretty well explained everything, I think, fairly decently on the carburetor. At this point, I'm going to go ahead and move on and show you your intake manifolds. There's several types of intake manifolds. Briggs has made several over the years. This, of course, is the one that I'll be using on the ladies that I'm fixing. You will encounter times that the intake may be just fine. The screws themselves have vibrated out. In an event like that, all I would tell you to do is remove the screws completely, pull the intake out, okay? Find the proper gasket. A lot of people think they can just put Permatex on these, slap them back on, and it's good enough. No, guys, trust me, it's important that you have a really good seal between this intake manifold and the engine itself, okay? If you don't, the air is going to cause you just all kinds of failures, okay? So keep that in mind, a good tight seal. Now, in saying that, I want to provide the right gasket for you guys if you have an intake that is made like this. This, of course, is plastic, and it's got the round hole entry, okay? This would be the right gasket for that. If the gasket, as I said, on yours was wore out, hard, or chipped. Okay, don't ever use a gasket over if it's chipped. Okay, I don't recommend you use a gasket over, period, but there are occasions that you can get by with it if you use a little aviation Permatex. I'm not a big Permatex fan, guys. The part number for this particular intake manifold is 699644. The gasket's part number that goes on this intake manifold is 699649. But as I said, there are many, many different intake manifolds. One of which is built like this. Now I know what you're thinking, why would I pull off a perfectly good intake manifold if there was no problem with it? Well, guys, what you'll run into is, as I said before, if you have an air leak in one of these, and you'll know it because the engine will surge like crazy, you need to go trying to find that air leak, okay? It's not always the carburetor, and this will be a good example to you guys as to why. This intake manifold looks absolutely perfect. There doesn't look like there's a problem in the world with it. It's not broke in the center, it's not chipped at the end, anything like that. So most people say, well, it's fine. Why not reuse it? Let me show you guys. Look at here. Do you see what's happened here? See the fractures? This happens due to vibration. This is something you want to look out for. So don't always have your mind set that the problem is where you potentially think it is. Go searching for the problem. A lot of times you're going to find things that you didn't realize, okay, that could ever be the problem. But they will be. And as I said, this is the intake manifold. I took this off of, I think it was a 3.5 Briggs engine. And yes, this is also a 3.5. But as I said earlier, there are many different style intakes that they used. I've even seen the newer ones where there's actually a plastic insert that gets inserted here on one of these sides, and it's got a hole shape like this one, and you typically see them on your Quantum. These are some earlier intake manifolds. This is back when I feel that Briggs actually made quality. As you can see, they're built exceptionally well, aluminum with a light metal, tin if you will, and they just press fitted them. There's nothing wrong with that, but if you ever have an air leak in one of these, all you need to do is simply get you some Loctite, pour it in between them, right in between the groove, push it together and let it seal. That's generally all it takes. If you want to go a step beyond that, you can get you some solder, okay, heat it up, pour you a little solder around it, it'll seal it off just fine. Basically the same thing for this one here. I feel like these are the better versions. Howsoever, I know that they phase these out. They don't make them anymore. What you're going to run into nowadays is plastic crap. As I said, I'm not a big fan of the plastic, but hey, you know, we work with what we got. But that's just a good example as to why you can think that an intake manifold is perfectly fine. And in appearance, it looks to be that way. But you always want to check. And the part number for this one, if you had one like this one, or this one, would be $270345S. I'd showed this tool off earlier when I was working on the carb, basically showing you what type of tool you would need if you were going to remove the primer. I neglected to tell you that this tool not only removes the primers on these small pulsa prime carburetors, but it removes the primers on quantum engines as well. As you can see, all you got to do, reach in, work it, and it'll pull itself out. Now this particular one is not in terrible shape, but I'm going to pull it out anyway, as you can see. Just giving you another demonstration of how the proper tool can make a big difference. 19461. And of course, if you had a quantum engine that was built like this, the primer would be, if you got it from TE Warehouse, primer part number is 241031. Guys, I think I've pretty well explained everything that I can about the carburetor and the various type of intakes at this point. I'm going to go ahead and end the video. I did want to mention that Scotch-Brite goes a long way in cleaning a tank. Okay, once you pull the carburetor off and the diaphragm and the gasket, you expose the gas tank, the mounting surface. You can use just a little Scotch-Brite, okay, and there's different courses of this. I forget what exactly this one was, but it's a finer course, and you can apply it, rub over it real well. It'll shine everything back up if you have any corrosion. Of course, you need to spray it out and flush the tank once you do that. But basically, I think I've covered everything. I'm going to go ahead and end the video, YouTubers.